Well, I think we probably should get started. I've been told that 3 minutes after the hour is the prime time. In fact, Helena Ayacuta is the one who has told me that, and there she is on my screen. Hi, Helena. Helena's the one who says 3 minutes after the hour, and you can start a meeting. So, with that, I would love to get started with the program and welcome all of you to Global Citizen Circle. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Theo Spana-Stunfy, and I'm the president and executive director of Global Citizen Circle. The Circle began in Boston in 1974, almost 50 years ago, as a means of bringing together diverse groups of people who might not otherwise have met one another to engage in dialogue on critical issues, both local and global. It's always been our belief that enduring solutions to these kinds of seemingly intractable problems require a sustained commitment to dialogue, conversations, and connections that can lead to constructive change. And that's what we've been committed to for nearly half a century. I'm so pleased that today our circle is launching the first in a series of programs addressing climate change, social justice, challenges, and most importantly, solutions. As a small organization with a global reach, we are fortunate to have great people who volunteer as directors and global advisors to help us put these programs together. The planning and execution of this series of climate circles is thanks to Hitan Kalan, Sean O'Kane, Nadine Hack, and Deb Ropke. I'm going to turn to Deb in a moment for her to set the context for today's discussion. But first, let me tell you a few things about her. Deb is a coalition builder and a sustainability and equity leader. She led a successful US Department of Energy funded initiative to accelerate solar energy deployment at electric cooperatives. President of Everglade Community Power, she works with electric cooperatives to help them achieve equitable solar sources. As a trusted advisor to Global Citizen Circle and an active member of our program committee, Deb has played a pivotal role in helping to put this series together. So I want to thank you, Deb and Hitan and Sean and Nadine so much for all of your help with this program and the ones that will follow on climate change. And now I'm going to turn over the mic to you, Deb, to get us started.
Deb, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Theo. It helps to be able to hear me. I see that there are some new faces here. Some of you are personal friends of mine, and thank you so much for joining us today. And with that in mind, I think you can hear as you're dialing in, this is a circle of love. These are people who have been working with each other and on behalf of others across the globe for decades. And we welcome every perspective and each of the gifts that each of you bring to this discussion. And we thank you so much for being here. In this spirit, global citizen circles have helped to foster peace in Northern Ireland, end apartheid in South Africa, and lift up those working on issues like children and families, homelessness, nuclear proliferation, the AIDS epidemic, Chinese labor camps, Haiti and Cuba, women's rights, and so many other things. And it's today, part of the reason we're here today is that it's clear many of these challenges intersect with climate change and its impacts. Whether we're talking about food systems or water systems, energy and transportation systems, waste systems, housing, water system, who has access to clean water and who doesn't? Food, healthy food. It's cheaper to buy burgers at the fast food restaurant than it is to go down and buy fresh vegetables. And we have people living in the middle of farmland who have to drive an hour and a half to get groceries, right? Fresh produce. In our housing, and this is an issue that Denise and I work on a lot, we build affordable housing And we make it affordable by taking out insulation and effective heating and cooling systems and efficient windows. So it's affordable for people to move into, but it's not affordable for them to stay. So vulnerable populations are, they're more likely to live nearby and suffer the health consequences of fossil fuel generation. Extreme weather, fires, floods, and intense storms are increasing, and the most vulnerable often suffer the greatest losses or at least the biggest challenges in bouncing back. And some areas are becoming uninhabitable, and as a result, we are experiencing mass migration and global insecurity. And as people move around and animals move around, they're bringing pathogens with us, and that's affecting our health as well. So it's impossible to address all of this in one session. And the subcommittee, Heaton and Sean and Nadine, as we were talking about climate change and how it's impacting social justice, it was clear that we can't do this in one session, that we want to talk about this over the next 18 months. And to get us started, we're really excited to have our speakers with us today. And we've asked them to talk about what got them started and to help us understand when did they see the connection between climate change and social justice, a little about the work that they do, why they're passionate about it, and what keeps them motivated and hopeful as well, because it can feel very overwhelmed. I was talking to someone just the other day, and she said, geez, I have this friend who seems always to be the source of solutions and my inspiration, but she feels overwhelmed by climate change and what to do with it. And it can feel overwhelming when you think about it in the context of it's just me, and no matter, I can do everything that I can do, but it's not enough. It'll never be enough. But when we come together in our circle and come together and work collectively and also discover that there are amazing people forwarding this work across the globe and that it's possible for us to plug into it, I think, at least for me, that's what keeps me going and why I'm so inspired by the people who are joining us. And to those of you who are speaking with us, know that you are here with your tribe. We circle around you. We want to hear you, talk with you, and lift you up. And with that, I want to introduce my friend Molly. Molly and I we met through the Women's Council on Energy and Environment here in the DC metro area. And we met at a session, and I don't know if Molly remembers this or not, but it was a session on bringing electricity to rural villages across the globe. And since then, I call her up every once in a while to, very intensely talk to her about whatever big problem I think people need to be working on right now. And invariably, Molly says, well, Deb, me and my team are already working on that. It happened the first time, and it happened again just last week. So she's doing amazing work on a number of fronts, and she's going to talk with us about that and also be our moderator today. So I'll turn it to you, Molly.
Deb, you are a gem and a joy, and thank you for inviting me into your circle, folks. If I've not met you, I hope to do so. And I'm delighted that you've taken time today to step into this conversation, because climate change is the most existential threat that we are facing. And the only way that we are going to solve for it is together. And the only way that we're going to get over the anxiety that's pressing at your chest, that keeps you up at night, is having conversations that help deconstruct what we are doing, where are the solutions, and how can we go better, faster together in solving for it. So let me tell you a little bit about me, and then I'm going to tell you a lot about our fabulous speakers today. I'm Molly Bao. I'm the Customer Climate Solutions Lead in Accenture North America, which is a professional services firm that does lots of stuff, but it effectively solves big, scalable problems that need scalable solutions. And for that, I focus on the customer end of the utility spectrum that needs climate solutions urgently and at scale more than ever. And so I work on developing affordable, urgent, market-based solutions like EV, solar, and storage, and getting people wicked smart wicked excited and adopting 6 Ways to Sunday. So I've got the pleasure and privilege of facilitating our conversation today about the intersection that Deb was talking about, climate and social justice. And what good looks like here today is that you recognize the intersection, and I suspect all of you do, and you're compelled by it, or you wouldn't be here. But you also come away with some inspiration about how to make a stronger connection in your conversations as you talk about climate change and you advance solutions in the work that you do and drive, and that you always have front and center solutions that are human-centered, that advance the health and prosperity and welfare of humans as we work to solve our climate challenges. So let me set some context. Deb asked me to talk about my personal story, but I want to tell you what keeps me up at night. And then I want to tell you what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I think many of you are likely savvy to the fact that climate change is a threat. I want to put a finer point on some stats that might arm you as you go into the world with conversations and force multipliers. So we are putting the equivalent of 7 Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs of destructive heating energy into the ocean every second. 7 every second. As we move through our daily greenhouse gas emissions through transportation, through energy, through agriculture, through industrial sectors. The last 2 decades were the hottest ever recorded. We are seeing mass extinction accelerate, with about 500 land animals on the brink of disappearing within in the next 20 years. For context, it took the last century to lose that many animals. So we are accelerating the rate of extinction. Carbon dioxide is being released into the atmosphere faster than any time in the last 66 million years. The 100-year flood is happening every 1 to 30 years, and that timeline is shrinking. Hurricanes are increasing their intensity. Sea level is rising, coastlines are vanishing. Cities along shorelines are increasingly practicing managed retreat because they know inevitably they cannot hold on to the land. Miami experiences dry day flooding every day. Indonesia just decided to move its capital Jakarta, to another more inland location, because Jakarta itself has sunk more than 8 feet in the last 10 years. Worldwide, our emissions profile, the NOx and SOx coming out the back of internal combustion engine vehicles, our industrial emissions, the pollution that's created by that kills more than 9 million people every single year. And that's just business as usual that we accept. Heat stress is now beginning to decrease crop yields from corn and soybeans and staple crops, and higher levels of exposure to carbon dioxide also decreases and depletes the nutrient content of staples like rice and wheat. You saw a massive drought precipitating the Syrian civil war, which broke out in 2011. About 80% of the agricultural base collapse, and you saw farmers moving into town cities seeking social services that did not come. It was a catalyst to the Syrian civil war. You're also seeing in Afghanistan some of the most devastating impacts of that country have, yes, come from the Taliban, but also they've had 2 decades now of increasingly dry conditions that are breaking apart not just the agricultural basis of the country, but social bonds as families marry off their daughters earlier just to have less mouths to feed. In Louisiana, where I'm from, we lose a football field of land every hour and a half to coastal erosion. We had the first official climate refugees in Louisiana move out of their town. It's called the Ile de Saint Jean, where we saw 90% of the island disappear down into the Gulf in just a few decades' time. So these are the things that keep me up at night, and this is why I do my work. This is what I go to work to solve for. But the thing that gets me out of bed is that we have the solutions to solve for this. We have the solutions to deploy at scale for energy transition. To stay under 2 degrees of warming, which is what our coalition of countries at Paris got together and signed on the dotted line to do, we have got to half our industrial emissions. We've got to half all carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere in the next decade. That's a heck of a lot of work. To get there, we're going to need 3 major things, and they all have social justice at the heart of it, the thing that we're going to talk about today. You need to make sure you've got consistent policy to take the technologies that need to be incubated and scaled, policies that help cite and locate these projects in places that have equity and justice front of mind. You need to have consistent investment in technology so the markets know how to get there. So policy. You need to have technology that is at a market scalable price point. We're seeing that. We're seeing policies in terms of carbon cap and trade. We're seeing investments in renewable be stimulated by governments all across the world. We're seeing the price of batteries drop more than 90% in the last 8 years. We're seeing EVs start to scale. And then third, you need the cultural zeitgeist. You need people to want it, to care about it, to talk about it, and have things like social justice, environmental justice front of mind as we push forward these policies. And we're seeing tipping points for all 3 of these things. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, because I work on energy transition. I work to scale EVs and solar and storage and make sure that we've got equity in mind when we do so. In the utility sector where I work, we've got a 1 million person shortage in the next decade, 1 million people short. So who is going to help us triple the amount of electricity? Because the grid is going to need millions of new lines of transmission and distribution to move all that renewable generation, to move all the distributed generation, the small scale storage, the EVs. Who's going to do it? And are we going to make sure that frontline communities that have been devastated and wiped out by economic distress and energy transition, how are we going to make sure they're taken care of as well? So that's the work I do. But the work that the 3 people who are going to tell you today about social justice is even more pressing and more relevant. And we're going to bring them up to the mic and invite them to share their stories, invite them to tell us how they got into climate, why they think or how they think about the intersection of climate change and social justice. And first up to the mic is a lovely lady. You heard Deb talk about her. She's a collaborator with Deb. Her name is Denise Rockman. She serves as the Environmental Climate Justice Chair of the Indiana State Conference of the NAACP. And for Indiana NAACP, she works on energy justice. Denise has been organizing the Just Energy campaign, and she led a contingent that was crucial to defeating House Bill 1320, a bill that sought to depict a narrative that solar was unfair to people of color. Denise also works to develop the next generation of youth leaders through programs like Youth Scientists and our community scientists. So Denise, we've got 2 questions today for each of our speakers, and I'm going to start with you. What life event or experience led you to engage in climate change action as it connects to issues of social justice? So field that question for us, and then help us understand a little more about the work that you do. Tell us some stories about it and the things that you're proud of. Over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Global Citizen Circle, for inviting me into the circle. I really enjoy being in a global space. I believe in no borders and no boundaries. So, and that we're all seriously connected in all of our societal challenges. I feel as though I was actually born into the social justice movement. So before addressing climate change, I was born into it. It's part of my DNA. And I also want to just circle back to say that I have a mantra that climate change solutions may be inevitable, but equity is not. And so in my journey being born into civil and human rights activism, my mother went to Beijing, China during the time of Hillary Rodham Clinton fighting for women's rights. She started one of the first Head Start programs in our humble town of Lafayette, Indiana. And my big mama marched for Jobs for Justice and went 2 weeks before her firstborn granddaughter or grandchild would be born, i.e. me. So she felt the dire necessity to fight for the social justice movement. And my father made sure that the first Black Vietnam veteran that was killed was named on a child care center. And he also attended the Black political convention in Gary with Richard Mayor Hatchard had started back in the 1970s. So I tell a story of that I come from this long line of freedom fighters. It's in my DNA. And then even prior to those folks, there's ancestors that I don't even know that journeyed across the transatlantic and died. Over 12 million journeyed across to the United States, becoming enslaved, part of enslavement, and have been seeking a just transition ever since. I identify as a person of African descent, and we have been seeking a just transition from the redlining, from Jim Crow, from what we call Jim Crow's brother, James Crow, in the words of Michelle Alexander, that seeks to identify and prophetize our children by the time they're in third grade to go into the mass incarceration or into the school to prison pipeline. And so this long line of ancestors that have endured and have been seeking this just transition. And so through that frame, also our communities have been underinvested. We do live near the polluting highway systems. We suffer from the urban heat islands, and our children ride on these diesel buses, breathing in these fumes. We have been the essential workers, the underemployed and the unemployed, and those that were most direly affected by the pandemic. And so we lean into a frame called the Just Transition framework that the NAACP and the members of the Our Community, Our Power helped to create. And it talks about stopping the extractive economy and leaning into the regenerative economy, or stopping the bad and bringing in the good. And by doing this, it will make our communities resilient from the impacts of racist systems, from the impacts of the climate changing. And the climate is changing because there are these racist systems, or these the root causes of these systems are polluting systems, they're unjust systems. So if we make them more equitable, then there will not be people that are being direly impacted, not to mention the globe and the planet. Our program, which I work for the national office as well as a volunteer for the Indiana State Conference, and in my role as the national staff person, we have 3 objectives that we share with our members and that they advocate for, which is to reduce harmful emissions, particularly greenhouse gas emissions, to advance clean energy and energy efficiency, and to support our community's livability. And through some of that work, where I connect with Deb too, we were able to create it was called the Solar Equity Initiative. We later changed it to the Equitable Clean Energy Initiative. And there we come together with lots of different organizations working on clean energy with an intentionality to come with a shared understanding around how policies and practices should be employed in various communities. And most recently, we launched what was called the Equitable Solar Policy Principles, which you can find at our website, again, helping giving principles and guidance on what would be equitable and fair, everything from workforce development to climate resiliency to grid resiliency and so forth. Our members, we have examples across the nation. We have over 2,500 members across 2,500 units across the United States. We have about 12 million members. And our members, for example, we launched a solar project in California on a domestic violence center where the victims of domestic violence were trained to install solar. And in addition, this non-for-profit, the Janice Center, was able to obtain solar, helping them to reduce their CO2 emissions, helping to reduce some of their energy burden so they could get back to their mission. We also had our Rocky Mountain Conference deploy solar, where they trained returning citizens or formerly incarcerated on how to install and deploy solar. And so we try to put the vision, we are fighting the bad, and then we're also moving this vision of what is possible. Again, some of our members are stopping fossil fuel development, such as in Union Hill. We have members that are working on deploying community-owned solar, both in Massachusetts and in Indiana. And we work on, I most recently was able to go to Glasgow, Scotland, as part of COP26. And so we had a mantra of how to build back Black domestically and abroad, because there was, just folks that weren't even able to attend because they weren't able to be vaccinated or show vaccination proof to participate within that global forum to advocate for what they need. And in addition, we know that developing countries like the United States use more energy and pollute more than underdeveloped nations. And so there's a call for them to provide investment dollars into the Green Fund to help our underdeveloped nations to be able to have just the basics of electricity, and they might as well lean into clean energy. That's all I have, except to say that I am hopeful in spaces like this, and that many more across the globe that are imagining and reimagining what we know is possible, which is a just system for all, which then equates to climate or environmental justice. Thank you.
Denise, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing and driving to inspire youth to make change happen in our local communities, to create pipelines for jobs. So you are a rock star. Denise has got to leave us, friends. So if you have questions for her, put them in the chat. We'll make sure she gets them and sees them. But we thank you for your time and for your leadership. We're going to turn to another leader today who works across South Africa. His name is Bobby Peake. Some of you may know him. He is the founding member of the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, South Africa's oldest active community-based EJ organization. EJ is what cool kids say when they say environmental justice. And that alliance campaigns against toxic oil refineries and toxic dump sites in Black communities. In 1998, Bobby received the Goldman Prize for Africa for uniting communities against polluting industries in South Durban. He's been the director of Groundwork since 1999. Groundwork is an NGO focused on EJ, again, environmental justice, you're a cool kid, working with community organizers, movements, and nonprofits in South Africa and across Africa in areas of climate and environmental justice, health, and people's environmental justice education. He advises on various environmental justice strategies regionally and globally, and he is here to share with you his on-ramp into the connection between climate and energy justice. And he's here to share more with you about the work that he's doing and driving to affect change. Bobby, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Molly. And I will, say I have not caucused with Denise before this conversation, but she's laid the foundation to what I'm going to say next. Thank you, Denise. It's really good to be with you, Denise. I know a great activist called Dana Alston out of the US, who was key to the environmental justice movement, not only in the US, but also in South Africa. And our EJ work in South Africa links a lot to environmental justice struggles in the US. Myla, good to share a platform with you and another great activist from Indonesia. It's like Indonesia has conveyor belts of activists that just come out of Indonesia. I work with Wali, Friends of the Earth in Indonesia, which is probably one of the greatest grassroots organizations in the world, organizing under at a local level in the difficult circumstances. Debs, Theo, Molly, Etan, thanks for organizing. Really great to be with the circle. Groundwork, just very quickly, is an organization that, on one level, we will protest and burn ties in the street, get arrested and go to jail. And at the other level, we will write speeches, we will advise governments and ministers on policy. So for my sins, I sit on the Presidential Climate Commission. And for my other sin, I also now and then get arrested for doing things that they say we shouldn't be doing. When the question was put to us, I couldn't settle on, I settled on one experience very quickly. But then I reflected and I realized it was actually a lifetime of social justice challenges that got me to think of environmental justice, environmental racism, climate justice. And now today, the demands for a just world all come through a framing of the just transition. So I'm a 53-year-old Black South African man. Some people would say I'm color. I have asthma, and as a child, I lived 143 meters away from South Africa's oldest oil refinery, ExxonMobil. And I got sick regularly from the pollution. We were housed there because we were Black. But, at a young age, at the age of 8, I was sent 750 kilometers away from my mother and my family because of the oil refinery and my deteriorating health. I returned to the village after school, and while studying and doing research on the relationship between the oil refinery and the community in my neighborhood, it was very clear that even in a post-democracy, corporates are corporates, and they will continue to lie. So with the support of my professor from Michigan State University, David Wiley, who was, director of the African Studies Center there, meeting Mandela, I got the guidance and the courage to challenge, a remnant of the apartheid regime. I felt strong. I worked with community. We organized collectively on health, and we did this with patience. First we thought we'll get our victory within 1 year, and we realized 30 years later, the struggle still continues. I realized, we are a collective. We needed to support each other, and we needed to agree upon messages for our struggle. And what we landed on was people's health. People's health is sacred. People know that pollution causes ill health. So talking to people about health, people trusted us, and we could take forward this fight and, challenge for environmental justice and for a collective, very important, a collective environmental justice. So it is not an event, it's a lifetime of experience, very much like Denise, of listening and witnessing the very young people that are struggling, and very many old people and young people that died in my village because of cancer. It was indeed Hitan, who's on this call today, who wrote a letter in 1995 and who warned us of whether democracy will deliver or not. And he said, a new South African nation was born, but the old regime did not die. Ticking quietly behind the bells of freedom lies an environmental time bomb. For the millions who are forced to drink contaminated water, to work in hazardous mines and factories, and to live in smoke-filled houses lined with asbestos, the right to a clean and safe environment has not come with the psychological liberation of casting the ballot. And that's really important. We still struggle today. The world still struggles. And Albie Sachs, who was one of our original constitutional court justices, says this eloquently when he says, when we breathe the air of freedom, we must not choke on hidden fumes. So, you know, based upon this very personal experience, I plowed my energy into working with people on the front lines of climate disaster. And, you know, Prime Minister Motley of Barbados so eloquently spoke about the front lines and how we're failing, how the world is failing those that are living on the front lines of climate change. Today, we focus on social justice and how it relates to environmental work that we do. And I often say, climate change is an elite discourse. It's not a discourse for people. I cannot go into a poor African shanty town or a favela in South America or the projects in the US and speak about climate change. They'll say, what? It's not an issue. It doesn't resonate with people. I cannot talk about alternative energies and renewable energies. That does not resonate with people. What will resonate with people are issues of service delivery. And, you know, Denise has said that very clearly. Clean water, sanitation, education, secure housing, safe spaces for women, safe transport, clean energy that does not kill them. That is going to resonate with people. And I think that's how we need to think about climate justice. So this is the challenge facing millions of people worldwide, where we talk about climate, we make promises on climate, but it doesn't get to the ground, where people are hustling daily to just make a living. And that's really critical to understand. We need to be able to assist people in that struggle. And in South Africa, a good life for people, in a discussion I had with people recently, a good life for people meant all they wanted was $230 a month. That's all. They were saying, if we can have $230 a month, we will be able to have a good life. So the climate crisis, the environmental crisis, the political and economic crisis of the world has the potential to create a movement that takes us on a pathway of solutions, a movement that could be under the banner, not of just a climate justice movement, but rather a movement for a just transition. And that is our response to a climate crisis. We must remember, we also have to look at what has caused the crisis, and then cannot turn back and think that has caused the crisis. Shell talks about a just transition, Total talks about a just transition, that they will be the solution to that crisis. And so this growing economy is something we need to talk about critically and consider whether we need an economic growth model or whether we need a regenerative, restorative economic model. And that's critical. Brownlock has already spoken about just transition way back in 2005, when we said that the real possibility that alternative energy sources, technologies, and applications might be taken up by everybody, the poor, is a project that they have to define, and it has to lie with linking renewable energies to the deep transformation in the way the world works. We can't just say, well, the world continues working and we just swap and change energy. So that's really important, people. And finally, I think there's been victories. We recognize that a march is not a movement. A march is just a point in time when people come together. A movement is about everyday lived realities and processes, and it's about change over time and not change through one movement. So today we have an energy democracy project with poor people in townships. We have standards on air pollution. We have the beginning of a basic income grant in South Africa. There is a stop to the expansion of coal-fired power stations. Fracking is stopped. China, in September last year, said they're going to stop coal development and plow their money into renewables in Africa. That's because of struggles at a local level, not because of fancy NGOs. That was the struggles out of Ghana, the struggles out of Kenya, Egypt, and places like Zimbabwe, where local people said no to China. So it is about local, and it is about building our framing under a just transition. Thank you.
Bobby, that was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thanks for the work. You've moved the needle, and you're going to continue to do so. Folks, we're going to get a chance to circle back to Bobby and ask him more about his work. But first, to the youth, to the future. We're going to bring up a lovely lady. She's a young leader from Bali, Indonesia. She's currently living in Ghent, Belgium. She's an active climate leader in sustainability and waste management education for young folks. And she's the founder of Bumi Buddies. Bumi Buddies is an Indonesian-based nonprofit that focuses on raising environmental awareness and education across Indonesian youth. With creative educational methods, interactive learning, they're arming and equipping the next generation of leaders with the knowledge they need to go and move the needle like Bobby's been doing all across South Africa. She's currently studying her master's degree in environmental engineering, and she's an MCW Global Young Leaders Access Program alumni. And we're going to bring her up to the mic and ask her the same question. How did she get started, and when did she start seeing the intersection between climate and social justice? And we'd love to hear a little bit more about her work with Bumi Buddies. The mic, friend, is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly. Hi, everyone. I would love to say thank you as well for Theo for personally inviting me today to join the circle. I'm so happy that finally that I can join one of the circle as well. So yeah, for everyone, hi, my name is Mila. I'm from Indonesia. I'm the founder of Bumi Buddies. So if everyone wonders like what is Bumi Buddies, Bumi is actually Earth. So in Indonesian it's Bumi, while in English it's Earth. So basically we gather around to make like the Earth Buddies. So today, even though the topic of the event itself is the climate change as a challenge for global social justice, I would like to bring your attention to community, like the people that help to build us who we are right now. So like back home in Indonesia, like on my days and my bachelor days, I stumble with some underprivileged areas like near my campus. And most of the economically challenged people are living there. And when I would just pass this area, I saw a lot of children playing together. And like one of them just bought some snacks and they just threw away the traces there in the road. And I was shocked because I've never been raised that way. Because for me, for people to see people like litter around and just throwing their traces, it was rude. It's the same as rude, like, you know, like if you putting your feet on the table when everyone is eating. Like I was that shocked, like, oh, okay, this is like something that I'm not getting used to it. And that moment, it made me realize that how we all raise differently, like me and those children and my friends and other people as well. And after that, I started to go around that place a little more, and I just figured out that there will be like an annual flooding in that particular area, in the underprivileged area, and that flooding itself is getting worse by year, and that makes the children and of course with their family, they have to move away from there, and they have to be like so far from their school, they're from their nearby friends, even from their community, the people that they've been living for their whole childhood. They have to move away because of this climate disaster. And it makes me think that all of that will not happen if there are no extreme weather or if they have better facilities or better resources. And it makes me think as well that this is all because of the climate disaster. We all know that climate change is happening now and to all of us. No country or community is immune from this climate impact, but it's always the case like the poor and the vulnerable are the first to suffer and got hit the worst, especially the children. And me, I have the privilege to go to school and being an environmental engineer. So I kind of like know a little bit like how things go around. While these kids, this in their particular area, they don't have the same change like me because most of the time they don't even go to college. So I really just want them to make them understand about what currently happening right now and why they have to face this climate disaster, why it is happening, why we have to move because of annual flooding. How can we stop all of this? And I just want them to know about what they can do to help to avoid this climate disaster as well. Because in my opinion, they too have the chance to shape their future better until the climate impact is taking in effect, like right now or even later in the future. And I don't want them to think that like, hey, if I have to make some change from all of this, like to stop to happen or making something better, I don't want them to think like because we don't have the resources, we don't have the money to have an accessible education or even to can afford to go to a higher education. It's not about that. That's why I come up with Bumi Buddies, also along with all of my friends, that we have the same vision. Because Bumi Buddies here, we are here to provide accessible platform and equal education about environment, because we really want them to make them aware that the future of our world, like we as Indonesian, also as global citizen, is in our hands. That's why in Bumi Buddies, we are targeting the youth and children specifically, so they can get ready and start to make changes. Because we want Asmar to be like a more resilient generation. I just want them to know as well that we can tackle and reduce our future problems or even our current problems as well with like a lot of from aspects. I want them to have like things that can be, hey, you can just do it. You don't have something that's hard to do. It's just like something that you can do in your daily life. Like I want them to implement like less waste lifestyle, and then more knowledge about water and sanitation, and then how to live more sustainable. And then also, of course, how can we avoid this climate impact? We want them to be inspired to bring change for a more sustainable earth. And we just want them to make sure that this is all start not from how much money that you have or how many resources that you have, how many access to you to higher education. No, it is all from your mindset and also from your habit, because all of us, our small act does matter, because I believe that me, you, and all of us can help to create a better earth. That's why in Bumi Buddies now, we come up with several programs. At our first program, we call it Green Weekend. So me and my friends, we coming back to that underprivileged areas, and we do have like regular education. We talk about many things. We talk about biodiversity. We talk about climate change and everything. And then after that, we come up like with new programs, because we want to be like to reach more like wider audience, wider youth all over Indonesia. And then we come up with Less Waste, More Love. That's our second project. And then currently now we call it as Youth Eco School Project. Well, unfortunately, because of like the situation, we cannot do it offline. So we do it online so far. And we've been educating like almost 2,000 students all over Indonesia. We are talking about the same topics that we've been like pressing into, like less waste management, climate change, water and sanitation, and also sustainable lifestyle. So yeah, I think that's all for me. And you can ask more if you have any more questions. So happy to be here, guys.
The Greta Thunberg of Indonesia, everyone. Thanks for all your work. Thank you. It is so important. It is so critical. Folks, we're going to open it up for questions or comments if you've got them, in terms of how are you seeing folks integrate social justice, or what do you think needs to be done to do a better and deeper tie to policy, to investment, to mobilization? If you've got questions, go ahead and ping them in the chat, and then I'll call on you to say your question or your comment to the whole group. But while you're thinking about those and teeing those up, I will tell you, Bobby, I work inside those companies. that you spoke of. Every company you mentioned is a client of big Accenture and consultancies. Deb as well, who works in and out of utilities. And I will tell you that the conversation has fundamentally changed. I felt like I was dragging people up a hill, and that screeching sound was the sound of them digging in their heels and resisting as we were trying, because I'm a climate change girl. What I didn't share with you is that my grandpa was the head of R&D for Standard Oil and then ExxonMobil. He invented the chief compound in Exxon Supreme Gas. So he'd go to a gas station and pick up a little nozzle and go, "That's mine," right? Which is exciting. Every man in my family is a chemical engineer, which also meant they had very strong opinions about the oil and gas industry and its prominence. My father died of cancer at 40. And every close member of my family also had cancer as well because of Cancer Alley and the pollutants that we've got in Louisiana. So it's very deeply personal. And I always pushed businesses because of that to change, to find business-based solutions, to go urgently. And the conversation is fundamentally pivoting. People are starting to get it. You have youth joining these companies, pressuring from inside. The zeitgeist of divestiture and the work that all of you are doing to bang the drum, it's getting through, and the conversation and the tenor is authentic, and folks are still looking for solutions. They don't just have them in the bag. They need to work with ecosystem partners, organizations like each of yours, to get there, but it is changing from the inside. I'm gonna go ahead and call on William. William, you've got a thought, a comment, sir. Sing out. We'd love to hear it.
Thank you, Molly. I love groups like this because I think you've got a lot of people doing wonderful work, trying to solve a huge problem that is very, very complex. I always get very frustrated though, and it's no negative comment on what anybody's doing in terms of their work or efforts. But every time I get involved with a group like this and listen, I feel like screaming, because I think many of the times what we're doing is dealing with the symptoms of the issues that we're concerned about without actually focusing on what the root causes are of solving the problem. We are dealing with a global crisis that is threatening the evolution of our species and the evolution of our planet. And the issue is, unless we are able to galvanize an entire generation of emerging human beings to a common concept of how we're going to deal with these issues collaboratively, collectively, and with support of each other, we have absolutely no chance of solving the problem, because all we're doing is dealing with actual symptoms. Now, when you're talking about sustainability and regenerative growth, it really all comes down to economics. Now, I would tell you everything else you're dealing with, social justice, I get that. Molly, you were talking about technology and science, critical elements. But it's not just climate change, it's resource management, it's ecosystem destruction, it's gyres, it's carbon footprints, it's engineering, architecture, law. All these things all are integrated into a solution that is the basis of how we build our societies and how we expand our population and eventually manage the consumption of the resources that we have on this planet, which are finite. So what I would say is this. I always have a hard time talking to adults, because I think with adults, once you have full brain development at the age of 25, you're viewing everything through a pre-existing prism of already existing opinion. So you're looking at everything and you've already got your mind made up. I think our real opportunity is to start dealing with youth, and particularly between the ages of 14 and 18, where they've gotten to the point of brain development where they can deal with highly complex relationships, but they're still at a point where they are impressionable, where we can change their thought process, change their perspective on how we grow in the future, and create an entire generation that views the world from a singular one world concept and not 228 countries competing endlessly over diminishing resources. Okay. I'm working on 4 hours of sleep, so I'm a little sleep deprived right now because I've been working a lot, and I appreciate your patience with me. If we're going to solve the problem, it has to be through education. And I would tell you that when looking at climate change, we're going to get our asses kicked. We are in for a devastating mid-century comeuppance where we're going to be dealing with issues that are going to be beyond our capacity to manage as a global civilization. All right. In order for us to do this, we have to get through it. This is about human evolution. Not everybody is going to make it, but we have to put out some sort of a focused effort to galvanize collaboration so that we can save as many cultures as possible, as many lives as possible, preserve biodiversity, and create a hopeful future. I'm not looking at this with pessimism. I think this is the greatest time in human history. We're here, to give a football analogy, it's the fourth quarter, the 2 minutes to go, and the game is on our shoulders. This is where you want to be in history. We have the opportunity to change things permanently, and if we do things right, 10,000 years from now, they're talking about what we did, and if we don't do it right, they'll be cursing us from their graves. So I think we have that opportunity to make those changes, but I think it's going to come through the porthole of education. And what we're doing, and again, I don't want to get back to my own personal work with Energime University, and what we're doing with our group is trying to create a global platform to get into every school in the world through experiential education supported by live online mentoring from the top scientists, business developers, educators in the world who can work with students and start a global conversation amongst this generation where they're sharing ideas, planning our future, getting mentored. We're not telling them what to do because we've blown it. I mean, I know everybody on this line is doing everything they can and probably, is more educated on these subjects than 99.9% of the human species. But in general, our generation has screwed up dramatically, does not do it. We don't work together. We argue with each other. We're antagonistic. We compete against each other, and we are going nowhere. We're losing right now, and we're losing the battle big time. And all these little things that we're doing here, which all are fantastic and necessary, are all part of a much larger effort. And unless it fits into that effort with focus as to what it's doing and what it needs to support to make that work, none of this works. Education, and the type of education that we're talking about, experiential education, that gets everybody working together, thinking together, solving problems together, posing challenges together. That is what is going to get us to the finish line. Everything else fails if that doesn't succeed. That's it. I could go on for another 20 hours, but
William, I won't argue with you. This is one generation to the same generation. That well said, well said. And certainly, as someone who works in climate change every day, facts are useless to a lot of folks. It'll only cause folks to double down in many cases. And so effective communication, but communication through a new generation that truly understands the science and moves the needle on solutions is absolutely what it's going to take.
Molly, more than that, it's about sustainable and regenerative economic development. That is the driving force behind change in this planet. That's why we are where we are now. We're in a carbon-based economy because of the 20th century. Started with Standard Mobile, right? You know, right? And all the infrastructure on the planet, all of the investment is dependent on that infrastructure. So we can't go to war with the oil companies. We have to give them other opportunities. We have to take it away from combustion and move it to things like building materials that can be recycled, right? I mean, we can't be at war with Monsanto. I mean, these are companies that I fought my entire life and that I think of to a certain extent as being evil, right? On the other hand, the people that work there are not evil. The people there would do the right thing if they had an economic way to be able to do it. But as long as we keep putting this onus on them to have increasing profits every 3 months as part of a quarterly, report, there's no possible way that they can change. We have to make change adaptable. And the only way you do that is with collaboration, cooperation, and people understanding how we need to make these changeovers. I'm done. I'm going to keep. Sorry.
Do it, William. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I have many thoughts on that, being someone who works in energy transition. I'm going to turn it over to someone else who works over in energy transition, Deb, who is a guru on this topic as well. Deb, you had a thought.
I did, and I just want to emphasize, William, it was, we are having this conversation at Global Citizen Circle about, we want to bring in a youth speaker into every circle that we have, and that was on the agenda today for a reason. But I also want to emphasize what you just said, because I was on a meeting yesterday with a dozen utilities, and the conversation started out with my generation saying, this is too hard. People think this is possible. They're all kind of, they have these big goals. They don't know what they're talking about. And then the young guy, right, young engineer, he pipes up and says, you know what? In our territory, we have 100% renewable goal, or a net zero goal, and we're at 45%, and we're going to get there. This is possible. This is doable, and it totally changed the conversation. And it really was that young guy saying, no, this is all doable. So I really appreciate your comment about engaging the youth generation, the young generation, and supporting them, because they can change the conversation, and they're doing it.
Thanks, Deb. I appreciate that. We had a couple of other comments. Someone asked about geothermal. I'll tell you that is one of the hottest topics in terms of clean tech and climate tech innovation. And you see tons and tons, with a B, billions of money being poured into scaling pilot technologies. And there's several startups across the globe. It's going to be certain regionally specific when it comes to boring down and getting access to the heat wells, but it's definitely something that is up and coming, and a source of a lot of new innovation, and fortunes will be made around it. Another comment was made with respect to, how do we get the media to bang the right drum? And I'm inferring, because this wasn't written but implied, and tamp down the noise on this conversation. And what I didn't tell you is I'm a former radio and television reporter. And the reason I got into climate change was because of my experience in Louisiana, and I wanted to go tell those stories. And the reason I got out of journalism is I wanted to actually be part of the solution and not just tell the story, but I do have perspective about how to tell stories. And so some climate advocates and operators, business leaders are starting to deny interviews to folks who have both sides equivocation. So he said, she said, so the world is round. No, I must now get a world is flat, climate denier. And so that's not exactly a solution that scales. You ask a really great question, and several of you had similar questions about how do we make sure that the information environment isn't tainted, and make sure we get the right messages across that separate fact from fiction, from signal and noise. And I would love folks who've got thoughts on this to sing out and come off mic and weigh in. I would say it's getting education of the masses so that you can push back with publishers, with journalists, and make sure that you're selecting the news outlets that are trusted. But that's harder to do than easier to do. So if someone's got a thought in terms of the media conversation, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you and sing out. I think someone did raise their hand, although it went down. So I don't know if that was your cat stepping on your keyboard or not. I think someone, go ahead. Go. I see a finger being raised. I think that's a hand, or at least a very strong upward direction. Yes. I don't see your name. It's a Zoom user. Go ahead. You're on mute though. So unmute yourself.
I'm from the Philippines and from the Earth Savers. Actually, I got connected here because of Nadine and Jeff, because we got connected through a human rights effort to liberate us from dictatorship. And returning to the Philippines, it's basically freedom from pollution, which is causing so much illness. And when you talk of health, really, the poor are the ones who cannot be, let's say, cannot address themselves out of this problem. Just think of an archipelagic country like the Philippines, and we have a minimum of 20 storms, super typhoons, and it's terrible because even up to now, so many years ago and repeated again, we still have people suffering from climate catastrophes and still living in tents. and think of the refugees in the most inhuman condition. And that's really injustice, because also there is funds, there is assistance from around the world, but there is corruption. And I think good governance must enter into this, and education is really the key. My husband, who started the Earth Savers movement, said we really have to diffuse this ecological time bomb of global warming and build disaster resilience against these intensifying catastrophes that destroy life, livelihood, homes. Up to now, people have no homes. And think of the injustice that is being done. We had to stay collect millions of signatures for 6 weeks in front of the French embassy to try and give the voice to stop nuclear testing in the Pacific. Sure, they can test, use all of their money and dirty the waters and poison. When my husband went to the Pacific Isles, what happened is you see women just sending their babies through the waters because they are born well with their heads not well formed, etc. That's total injustice when the rich and the strong are able to do this. There is a problem in, you have all of the laws and it is not being undertaken. For instance, in mining, you dirty all of the waters and everybody gets sick, and the poor indigenous peoples are not really provided the necessary, let's say, not compensation, but really to be able to reap the benefits of it. It's only among those who, the foreign partners and the local greedy people who don't give a damn about the situation. So we work really in using technology and arts. You said you're in media. We run television and radio program. We do soap opera because people don't understand the science. You have to translate it in cultural symbols and language that they understand. We have a rap song on garbage recycling and composting. We have poetry. We have paintings, and it's got to be participatory. You have to involve the fisher folk. I mean, all of these characters that, I mean, the people must be able to mirror themselves in what you are presenting. The arts is so important to reach the mind and the heart of the people. So if this is the movement we're doing, in fact, COVID just changed. I hope to, well, through Nadine and her husband, to get involved, your group, the Global Circles, in what we're doing in an sustainable development goals, resilient art, earth-saving agenda, which uses creative workshops, festivals, forum like this, where we can really gather the best models for cultural caregiving to all, because culture is the right of every citizen, and it should be the powerful catalyst for education, for values, lifelong learning. Values aren't there. It's really taking, transitioning from greed to compassion and caring and comfort. And you've got to reach people, and we have to have a creative army of artists, educators, communicators, scientists, who will work not by force of arms and missiles, but through the power of arts and media. I hope you get involved in this program we're doing right now.
think that's so powerful. In business, we say culture eats process for breakfast. And it's the currency that moves us. It's the beat to which we navigate life. And I see a lot of folks are inspired by your comments. So I'm going to call on a few of them. Let's get a couple of new voices in here. Alicia Parker.
Yes, hi, thank you, Molly. I appreciate just give me a few minutes. I personally have grandchildren that don't want to go to college. You know, they feel it's not for them, but I know they would love to be able to contribute to the solution. And I think that we need to consider that not everybody wants to be an engineer or a scientist or get a college degree in climate mitigation. We need more technical training, more people who open up schools that can have young people do hands-on work, the hands-on work of putting things together after the engineers and the scientists have created them. So I'd like to know if people are working on that. Are there people out there that are working on those technical skills that people are going to need, and opening up schools or places where they can go to learn those skills?
Alicia, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And if folks, you've got resources for Alicia, please put them in the chat here. The Biden administration just signed into law $1.2 trillion hard infrastructure bill called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That J is really important because part of that unleashes about $1 billion of workforce development training and what we call middle skills, those technical, mechanical skills. The number one and the number two jobs in demand in the country right now are solar engineering and wind turbine installation. And so, or solar installation and wind turbine engineer. And there are a lot of workforce development collaborations happening with community colleges, with actual workforce development and investment boards in counties where they're focused on energy transition and skilling. One that's local here to DC, well, it's national, but there's a really big arm in DC, is called Grid Alternatives. And it takes frontline workers, ex-convicts, ex-coal miners, and skills them into solar installation jobs. So you might want to check that out. But by all means, if you others have recommendations, put them in the chat. I'm going to call on Stephen Dennis.
Thank you, and thanks for Theo for the invite. This is my first Global Citizen Circle event, so happy to be here. I had raised the question about the media. I had recently watched the film Don't Look Up. I don't know if people have seen it, and I actually know the person who was responsible for writing much of the script. And as much as it is a reflection on like our society's view towards like climate change and science, I really viewed it as like a pretty big like media critique of our, although, and this is from a US perspective, but although viewership declines in like mainstream cable news, they still have like such a stranglehold over like the narrative of like just the daily talking points. And so that was sort of like my question. It's like, every day you hear about the stock market, you hear about, the Dow Jones, but you don't hear about, this new, update, positive or negative in the world of climate. So for those, maybe like Bobby, who have led such like successful campaigns around, climate and sort of like the conversation around it, did, changing how the media discusses it play a factor? Because it sort of feels like it's we're at the end here and you got to like rip the radio stations away from Mussolini and like take control of like the language and just like the discussion that is happening around it. Because if people don't know it's a problem, then they really don't have an inspiration or motivation to act on it. So thanks for the conversation today.
Stephen, thanks for weighing into the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to Bobby since you teed it up. So Bobby, thoughts and reflections on that question or the conversation? You're on mute, sir.
Mute. Sorry, you're on unmute. That's the famous Zoom word. So cuts a long story short, media is complex, isn't it? I mean, it's about communications. It's not about media. And yet it's about media that controls the national discourse and gets policy changed at one level. And that probably could be so in a place like the US and to a certain extent in South Africa. But when you look at communications, you're talking about another beast. And you're talking about how do we, and as William said early on, education is about communication as well. It's about how do you get the message across to the youth that things have to change. And that's really important. So I don't have a type of answer, and I don't sometimes have a belief in media, but I think it's an important space that we have to watch and just recognize that we also have to have communications below that, because there's communications, at a very local level. You heard about the soap opera early on within the Philippines. I mean, these are interesting parts of communication. But let me move on very quickly. I think I'm a bit worried about the reality that we are in a crisis. Millions of people are going to die mid-century, but we're not challenging the system, and we're not challenging and getting to a process of a democratic process to allow for equity. Because the poor that are going to die, the people that are going to be the poor in Bangladesh. And so I think there has to be a discussion on equity and there's the big discussion at the UN Jamboree is about loss and damage. But we really need to talk about how do we bring about an equity, and again, William says collaboration, collective, and support. Those three words are environmental justice framing. If you talk about an environmental justice frame, we're talking about that. So how do we get that going? The one big thing that I think we need to also really be worried about is we cannot continue our energy demand and replace fossils with RE. It's not going to work. Technically, it's not going to work. So that's the one thing. But more importantly, it's going to be a privatized RE because it can't work. So it's only those that need it that are going to, those that can buy it, that is going to get it. And what happens on the other end of that is the mines in Zambia, the mines in Congo, the mines in South Africa still continue to rip out, kill people because somebody needs RE. Nobody thought about how do we re-engineer energy usage, and energy intensity is what I really want to talk about, and consumption.
Bobby, I can't wait to talk to you about that. That is what I do on the daily. Thank you, sir, for weighing in. Simona, you've raised your hand. Over to you. And you're on mute.
Hi, sorry. I actually accidentally raised my hand. Apologies.
No worries. No worries. Put your hand back down. I'd love to pull some of the younger folks. Oh, good. Thank you for joining. I'd love to pull in some of the younger folks into this conversation. If you are part of the generation that is going to be our future leaders, and you are inspired by this conversation, either because you've got a perspective on how to break through the noise of media, which is, there's no centralized media. Anyone with a phone now can weigh in, and there's no filter. There's no producer that's a gatekeeper to your thoughts as you explode them out onto Twitter and it goes viral. If you've got a thought on that, if you've got a thought on how to materially contribute to part of the change, we'd love to hear from you. Does someone want to raise their hand and sing out? I know William does. Let me see if there's any other folks who've not heard from yet, and then I'm going to turn it over to William otherwise. William, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation, right? And whatever you design in terms of a system that is going to re-educate or educate an entire generation has to mirror the behavioral patterns of that generation. It has to be online. It has to be fun. It has to be engaging. It has to be multimedia. What we are creating at Energime University, and again, I'm not doing this to pump anything because we're a not-for-profit, is an interactive game called Sustainable Planet. It's a game that's played by 10 million students at one time, where teams of students from around the world collaborate to build future societies working on different types of environments, different regions of the world, coordinating trade, policy, technology development, you name it. right? And then they're graded depending on a number of things: carbon footprint, economic growth, how much they're able to manage locally, all that stuff. But the entire point is, what you have to do is education always worked better for me. And I was lucky when I was growing up. I went to a private school that when I went from public education to private education, the teachers took a real interest in getting you to understand something. So they weren't trying to get you to memorize or lecturing to you and expecting you to read a book and get it. When you had an issue, they put their arm over your shoulder and said, let me explain it to you. Or what is it that you're not understanding? Education and opportunity empowerment should be a human right for every human being on this planet. If we have failed anywhere as a species, it's the fact that we have not connected up with the entirety of our population to be able to empower them to maximum contribution, productivity, and involvement inside that society. So we have to create a platform that makes that a human right. Beyond that, we need to create a platform that becomes so engaging that it doesn't feel like education. Education should be a matter of sparking the child or the student's curiosity, and then giving them every opportunity and every pathway to fulfill that curiosity. Now, we've got a challenge right now that is threatening our entire species, our entire planet, and the biodiversity of our planet, you name it, right? We need to put these students in the position of Frodo, of Luke Skywalker. We need to make them the heroes. We need to give them the responsibility of saving the future and give them the tools and make it fun and engaging and let them develop their relationships with friends from around the world. So they stop viewing things as American and Chinese and Russian and Arabic and German or whatever, and they start seeing the entire world as a single species working together. I'm a Gandhi disciple. I think every human being on this planet is interconnected and we're all distant cousins. I hate the comment when people say African American. There's Black people and they're white people, but we're all African. We all come from that same tribe 2 million years ago. We all came from that same genetic linkage. And until people start recognizing that connection for the first time in our history as a species, we can't move forward. Anyway, I'm sorry, I don't mean to preach to the choir here. I'm just saying that in terms of doing this, it needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging. We're doing this interactive game that's played online by 10 million kids, and it's supported by an education site, which will be populated by some of the top educators, scientists, you name it, who will be there round the clock to engage in conversation, to provide content, to start communications and share ideas. That's how we solve the problem. Getting people to think as a world as opposed to individual countries, individual communities.
Bill, you're a gem. Thank you again. It's powerful and it's on point. It's completely spot on. You gotta get them by the grapes, friends, and you gotta start with a so what, why do folks care? And you gotta figure out how to communicate intelligently and creatively and culturally. Folks, thank you for communicating with us. Thank you for coming to this conversation today. It has been broad. We have covered social media, whether or not we have to rethink our entire energy system and the way we create, consume, and move electricity and electrons. We've talked about youth empowerment. Invite you to stick around to the rest of our climate series. I'm going to bring up Heaton, and he's going to tell you about what's coming up next in terms of our series. But thank you for your time. It's non-renewable. Climate change is real. So we deeply appreciate sharing these moments with you today. Sir, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Molly, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Having transitioned from the in-person global citizen circles to the online ones since COVID hit, the key to making these incredibly successful meetings has been having a great moderator. So Molly, thank you so much for moderating an absolutely wonderful panel of speakers. I do want to thank Denise, Bobby, Myla for really participating today and coming together to launch our first foundational chat on what's going to be a series on climate. When we first started planning this, realized very quickly that we were taking on a very large topic that has multiple tentacles all over, and that to really engage us deeply into it, we needed to have a series of it that will probably go 12 to 18 months. And all four of you really helped us set that foundation in making the connection between climate, social justice, and all the other issues you all raised today. And so it's just a fundamental core value of what the circle is about, bringing people together, bringing issues together, and hearing all these multiple voices chiming in on something. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to also remind you that this is part of a series, so please be on the lookout for the next 3 or 4 that will be coming out in the next couple of months. We're trying to line up a series of speakers. We're trying to deal with questions of media, questions of agriculture, questions of infrastructure, and we'll be tackling these as we sort of move along. So please keep a lookout. Now that you've joined us, even if it's for the first time, you are now part of the circle. Welcome to the circle. You will never leave the circle. And so thank you for that. And I do want to close out by saying, in the tradition of the Dunphy family, when they used to bring people together, please, I welcome everyone to stay on for informal chat. It's 30 years ago when I went to my first 1 year at the Parker House. It's the informal chat after this that was riveting, where people really make connections. It's a key element of what the circle is about. We learn, but we also connect with each other. So I know people have a hard stop. We understand that, but for anyone who can stay just to mingle, just to chat, please, we welcome that and we encourage it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, everyone. Please, as Hitan said, we'll stay on as long as people would like to. I know many have to leave for meetings and things, and I appreciate your spending the time with us this morning, but we'll be here for a few minutes longer. So if you have something you'd like to add, please do. And thank you, and have a great day, evening, and week.
Hi, Theo. This is Angela.
Yes. Hi, Angela.
Before William gets away, he mentioned something about a game. I didn't see it on the chat. So can he put since you said you're going to send the resources, he talked about a game for young people.
Yes, Angela, are you there?
Oh, yes, I am. Angela, we're in development of it. It takes a lot of money.
Oh, you haven't done the game yet. I was just going to buy it for my grandkids.
Trying to get people to invest in it. This has been too big a leap for most people to understand the necessity for this type of an education model. So we've gone into other areas of trying to get money. We're actually about to sign a deal with the United Nations DP for Africa. They want to develop the initial iteration of the game. But we're also doing food security projects right now. I think we're negotiating with New York City right now for 10 acres that they're going to give us to do a huge food production project. And we're doing one in Egg Harbor City. This is based around food security. It's in conjunction and partnership with Cornell, Rutgers, Rowan University, half a dozen universities that are participating. It's going to grow fish and plants. It's going to be a job training center. It integrates with all of the NGOs. It's in partnership with Barnabas and Mount Sinai and a number of hospitals. And the idea is we're creating programs throughout the United States right now, and hopefully throughout the world soon, where we're creating organic food production facilities inside schools so that they can start feeding their students differently and educating them. Because the issue with climate change for the 21st century, if no one's paying attention, it's not going to be energy. We'll solve energy in the next 5 years. Technology's out there right now. And so we'll solve that quickly, but we are running out of food. Our food chain is collapsing, and we are going to lose billions of people due to starvation by mid-century if we don't quickly change how we raise food on this planet and start managing our resources. And something no one ever talks about is phosphorus, which is a requirement of fertilizer. And we've got maybe 32 years left of easily mineable phosphorus. It's recyclable, but we're not recycling it. There are only a couple of countries like Norway. I think Sweden and Germany are in the initial stages of starting to try to recycle their phosphorus. But once we run out of that, it's game over. So we empty out our oceans by 2049. That's Scripps Institute, that's NOAA. We run out of phosphorus by about 2060. Well prior to that, the poor countries in the world are going to start to starve. You see it right now. I mean, look at what's going on in half a dozen countries. You've got massive starvation. The cost of fertilizer this year alone is up 300%. Nitrogen is up to the point where farmers in the United States are not going to be planting corn. That's going to affect the cost of beef, the cost of chicken. Everything is going to start booming in price. And these are the initial stages of mass starvation. And if people think this is just this year and it's going to go away, people need to wake up. So I think we need to feed our population, but I think it's absolutely necessary that we don't waste our time feeding ignorant people. We have to educate them. If we
Yes,
don't
Bill.
educate,
Well, that's
Bill,
That's
so
why I brought up the point, William. I want to go back to that
Right.
that game. I have two grandsons that are living in Thailand. And if they can play a game, I mean, doing organic, farming in Thailand, I don't think so. But having what about Negroponte's multimedia center at MIT? Why wouldn't they
We've
want to
talked-
back something like this?
You know what happens, Angela? We talk to people about it, right? And this is an idea. Sustainable Planet was a concept that came out of my mind in 1972 after I read The Limits to Growth. And at that point, it was going to be a board game, and it's evolved over these years. And it's gotten to this point, God knows how, but there are a lot of people that are supporting it at this point, a lot of people that are working on it. Unfortunately, you find that once you come up with a really good idea, people want to compete with it rather than contribute to it a lot of times. And that's what we've run into over and over again. We come up with the idea and we present it to folks that can really get behind it and work on it. The United Nations being the exception, because I think they're going ahead with it at this point. But the immediate thing is they want to do their own version. They want to put it out as a board game. We're doing this as a nonprofit.
It doesn't need to be a board game. It needs to be online so that a kid that's in Bangkok can get in the game.
Exactly. That's our plan.
yes,
Okay.
and Angela, Global Citizen Circle has had meetings with Bill and have learned about what the plans are for this interactive game, and are really excited, Bill, to learn more as you continue to move forward with this and really get it off the ground, because I'm a complete believer in what you're trying to do with this, to engage young people in a way and on a platform that will really be powerful because of all that you've put into it. So I appreciate that, Bill.
Thank you. Angela, this is going to end up being a global game where I want to get the entire human species playing, and it'd be fun because they get to engage with everybody. It's a combination of LinkedIn and Facebook and SimCity, and you can imagine, but you get to interact with Nobel Prize winners and people who are just brilliant, and kids who have amazing ideas to change the world and share those ideas with other cultures. Because people, if you create, solar panels, you try to sell them to Eskimos, even though they don't make sense there. There are better ways to make energy in Alaska than using a solar panel. But if you're selling solar panels, that's your only solution. There are better solutions. They're specific to areas. Sustainability is a local issue. It's all food, water, waste, energy, economic growth, all that. But how you manage that in Saudi Arabia is quite different than how you would manage that in Chicago or in a place like the Philippines or Thailand.
Yeah, great. Bill, I just want to interrupt only because there's a couple people with their hands. They've been very patient here with their hands raised. And Cynthia, I'd love for you, if you're still there, I see your hand raised. Yes.
Yes, I'm still here.
Great.
So first of all, thank you, Deb, for inviting me to this. It's been really, really great. So I just had 2 points. One, because of what Bill was just saying, my background is in agricultural entomology, so I follow the food systems a little bit. But certainly one topic you might want to consider thinking about bringing up is how climate change is affecting the ability to grow things in certain places.
Sure.
So the overall growing process of where we grow things. And in that, salinization of soils is a huge issue in the global world of what gets grown where. And desalinization is a very energy intensive part, and it's almost impossible to do in a lot of soils. But you've got these boom and bust energy sources, and there are a lot of opportunities for boom and bust energy sources to be combined with industrial processes that are very high energy intensive and can take a spurt of energy, but aren't so optimized that they need a constant flow. So you can stop and start the energy with the source instead of needing to balance it out so much with a battery system. So that was one thing, just because Bill was talking about food, and that's a big issue for me. So I really appreciate your emphasis on the ag system. But the second thing that came out of the conversation, which I really appreciated, were these little snippets of awareness on this hierarchical process of knowledge transfer. So I put in the comment that knowledge and education is necessary, but not sufficient. And I believe that really strongly, because you need to have these other layers of approach, whether it's the policies part or the cultural part. And from my perspective, a lot of this change is about empowering the existing infrastructure and people. So I really loved what the woman from the Philippines mentioned about doing arts, not so much because it was a focus on arts, but it was a focus on, if you're working with people, and Bobby mentioned, you go into these communities and you talk about environmental justice, and they're like, what are you talking about? Or you talk about climate change in some of these communities, and it's not real for them. I think the solution is really finding ways to empower what is real for them so that they create their own solutions, because that ground level of solution building is way more sustainable than anything that comes from the top down. And that is, I see Nadine saying money. money is the issue, but some of these solutions are about cultural change.
For you, my friend. She's
Pardon?
clapping. She's echoing.
Oh,
She's
that's
echoing what
clapping?
you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, so sign language, I'm familiar with this one, but yeah, it is a really, I've seen these collapses of education-focused initiatives. And if you're not really working with what the people have and what they're familiar with, it won't last, whether it's the green revolution. But in agriculture, I think of agriculture as probably the topic that has the most education about how to screw things up from the top down. Like, you can look at the history of agriculture and the way we've used education to try and move cultures and agricultural change, and it almost never works. And there's a whole body of knowledge about how to do tech transfer to get it to work that I think the climate community, the climate change community, and the social justice community, that overlap of how to do tech transfer and how to do knowledge transfer by empowering the people who are going to have to sustain it, to step back and listen and let them solve the problem and facilitate as opposed to instruct. I just love to hear some of those tenets. So anyway, those were my thoughts. So thanks for the chance to talk.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much for speaking up. And I'd like to call on Alicia. She's had her hand up for a little bit here, and please unmute yourself. Oh, you have unmuted yourself. Okay.
Thank
Floor
you.
is yours, Alicia.
Thank you, Theo. Bill, I was so happy to hear that you are working in a partnership with New York City. I think that is a great thing. I'd just like to know from you if you think there are a couple of things that I've seen. I've been trying to find a vehicle to get to the city that, they plant trees all over the city every spring. They should be planting edible trees. They don't have to be fruit trees, but they have to be edible, leaves and bark or whatever. They should be planting trees that if something happens, people can sustain themselves just by going out in the street, and taking leaves and boiling them, whatever they have to do. The other thing is that Florida has fleet farming, where they promote backyard farms, and they will plant for you, they will manage, they will maintain your backyard garden, they will put up trees in your, edible trees in your backyard. And I'm looking for somebody in the city to take that and run with that, to have, to help people who don't know how to do a backyard, a backyard farm, and to show them how to do it.
You want a response? Alicia,
Yes,
get in touch with me. Let's talk. I mean, we're involved. I go out just for fun on weekends, and I deal with neighborhood trees and clean up the dog crap and the urine and put down mulch and that type of thing. That's just a community thing that I like to get involved with. But the truth of the matter is, the world that our kids are going to live in, they're going to be responsible for raising a good portion of the food that they eat. They'll be growing it in their hallways, at their businesses, on their rooftops. It's going to look like, 17th century Paris in terms of people raising food all over the place. You already see this in places like India and China. Certainly in Southeast Asia, it's very, very common. But, yeah, you're right. These efforts, it's not just about teaching the kids. It's about the kids teaching the parents. It's about getting involved in the community. It's about improving standards of living. You have to make it adaptable. And the key to adaptability is creating a better situation for the person who is consuming. And if you can do that at the same point while you're educating them and while you're changing their consumption patterns, you've developed a solution that makes sense. Otherwise, all we're doing is creating tools, but we're not creating solutions. All right. All the technology, all the science, that's fantastic. We need it. I admire these people. I listen to them all the time and I learn a lot. But, that being said, this is about getting shovels in the ground and getting people to change their behavioral patterns. And you only do that through education, and you only do that through creating situations which increase their standards of living and the quality of their lives.
Absolutely.
Period.
And we have to push the leaders to move in that direction. I know Eric Adams is looking for new and innovative ideas. And I think these are things that he's going to be open to.
Well, Alicia, we're talking to Eric, and we're talking to Donovan Richards in Queens, and Adrian Adams has already wrote us a letter of support, and she's backing us. We talked to the borough president yesterday, his office, and we'll be talking to Eric also. We've talked to Eric before. You're right, he's going to be behind these projects. The first 10-acre project that we're doing is a huge project. It is a demo project. The project that we have planned is is a much larger project on 100 acres, which will become a food security project for the entire city, which hopefully we can then do as a template to do in cities around the world, because that's what's necessary to get our population through mid-century while we re-educate them. If all we do is create more food, we are not solving the problem. We're creating a bigger problem, but further down the road. We need to re-educate our population. And unfortunately, it's not going to be the adults. It's going to be the kids.
Absolutely.
The adults,
Yes.
Not this group. This group is wonderful. But think about it. I mean, you go into the community, you know what you're up against. You know how many people are deaf, dumb, and blind to this. And what they're interested in is how they're going to feed their family, how they're going to keep a roof over their head, how they get their kids to soccer practice. They know what football teams they root for, what beer they drink. All their preferences are already baked in. Kids, you can change. Adults, until their house gets blown away, until someone dies in their family, until something catastrophic happens that makes them change, they will not change what's comfortable. Kids are not comfortable yet. We're too comfortable.
Right.
Totally agree.
Right.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll connect you, Alicia and Bill. We'll
Alicia.
connect you offline. Yeah.
Thank you
Nadine.
very much.
Nadine.
I just want to say that Myla, who was with us from Indonesia, is working with young people, and she's part of a consortium of young people that Global Citizen Circle is really coordinating closely with. It's called Miracle Corners of the World. And they've got cohorts of young people from their teens to their young 20s who have gone through kind of leadership training to deal with all these issues. And then they become mentors to the next cohort. And they become a very close partner of Global Citizen Circle, and together with Miracle Corners of the World and other organizations that have youth-focused programs. We're also begun a partnership with the Obama Foundation to get more and more young people actively engaged, because we're in 100% agreement that they are the future. And in fact, Global Citizen Circle has been intentionally intergenerational from its jump-go. And, I often use the example of when we invited then Harvard Law School student Barack Obama to a 1990 circle. Well, he's a famous one, but we don't know how many of the young people who have been involved, who as speakers, as participants, over the almost 5 decades now, half a century, have gone on to become leaders in their own community and or are mentoring young leaders. And one of the things that we ask all of you, is if you have, if you know 20-somethings and teens, and or have friends or colleagues who know 20-somethings and teens, please, please extend invitations to them to join us at these global citizen circles, because we'd really like to amplify their voices.
And Nadine, let me just interject. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to interject because I do know that, the timing for these circles is often an issue in terms of getting younger people to participate, because we're doing it during school hours or they're at work and they can't take that time off. One thing I will say is that we are working on creating edited videos of these circle discussions with the key points, and they're going to be 20-minute videos. They're not going to be, an hour and a half, 2-hour long things that nobody will watch. It's going to be very directed, targeted on the issues. And then we are creating a discussion booklet, guidelines to have go along with those videos. So that's one way that we will hopefully reach some of the younger folks who can't make it to these discussions because of the timing for when we hold them. And many of you know that we have them at this hour because it allows the broadest participation from around the globe. And I also want to echo or add on to what Nadine said. In terms of young people, we have developed a youth development group that we are that is growing and in this past year, and we meet with them at different times and have very focused conversations with them at times when they're able to meet. And we also offer, opportunities to mentor, to find somebody who might mentor them. For instance, one of our young emerging leaders in that group is interested in the intersection of climate change and migration. And we connected her with Hitan, and Hitan had a nice conversation with her and gave her some directions on organizations that she might reach out to. And so we would welcome any young people that you know of and would like to join that group to send us their contact information, and we'll be sure to include them and reach out to them to join our youth group, which isn't a huge lift. It's more like we can offer them something. And of course, we want to be able to learn from them, because as everybody has said here, we have so much to learn from young people, and it's a two-way street. It's not all one directional. So please do let us know. And I want to thank everybody. Oh, we have a hand raised from Megan Hoskins. Please, Megan.
Hi, yeah, this is Megan. I am a Climate Action New Hampshire field organizer here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We're a project of the League of Conservation Voters, LCV. And I just have a couple questions. I first wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this in these series. My state director, Rob Warner, received an invitation and he shared it with our team. I have a master's in environmental studies with a concentration in advocacy for social justice and sustainability from Antioch University, New England. And this kind of, it's so good to just be here with you all in this circle. And yeah, I was wondering in terms of the youth group, what your kind of age range is for the youth group. And then also if you could repeat just the name of it again.
Yes, Megan, it is, the age range is quite broad right now. it is, we have high school students. So we have like probably the youngest is 16 and the oldest is you know, postgraduate college, you know, so late 20s, early 30s even. And we have called this group, for lack of a better name, and we are thinking of a different title for the group, but we've been calling it our Youth Development Collective. We will be changing that. But Megan, I'm happy to reach out to you offline and share more information if you have folks that would like to join us, if you yourself would like to join us. It'd be wonderful.
Yes, please. Yes, I'm definitely interested in joining you. I'll be turning 30 this year, so
that's
still
okay.
within
That's
the-
okay.
a little bit, so.
That is so young. So we would be happy.
Okay,
We'd be happy for
perfect.
you to join us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
And
You're
thank you,
welcome.
Jane. I see you have to go. Thank you for your help today.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to call this to a close because I know some people will just stay on and will feel badly checking out. But so I will officially call this a close to this meeting, and thank you all for being here and for staying in with us. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. We'll be having we'll have an invitation going out relatively soon for a March circle, and then an April circle as well. So thanks again.
Thank you.